I see semi-frequently people saying that the Bendy Books were never canon. The Bendy Books were decanonized very recently, within, I don't know, the last few months-ish. I'll put a timestamp up on screen if I can find it. But basically, this was a recent phenomenon. First of all, the fact that they would have to say that at all is really just proof of the fact that they were canon. So, Adrian Kress, for context, wrote Dreams Come to Life, The Lost Ones, and Fade to Black, as well as The Illusion of Living. Dreams Come to Life came out in 2019. After Dreams Come to Life came out, the rest of the books followed, I want to say, with gaps of like a year or so in between books. There is still a tweet on Adrian Kress's account. It's in reply to another Twitter user, and it says that yes, the books are canon. Adrian also confirmed this in DMs with another Bendy Tumblr user that I may or may not know. She basically confirmed through DMs that, again, they were canon, to the point where it was putting a little bit of pressure on her to make sure that the books kind of, you know, lined up with the story and everything. So, to preface this, believe it or not, I actually don't really like talking about the Bendy devs that much. It pisses me the fuck off when you have one of the two creators of the Bendy series coming out and just adding to the fucking misinformation. They're literally just either so ignorant that they don't want to do like a 5-second check to make sure, hey, you know, were the Bendy books ever canon? Which, first of all, that's something you should already know. Or you're just fucking lying about it because it's more convenient to just lie about it and pretend like the Bendy books were never canon because you're getting a lot of backlash. And of course, I wouldn't be saying any of this without substantial information to show what I'm talking about. So, I have a couple interactions here. These I pretty much snagged off of Real Fear. Real Fear is actually pretty good about documenting a lot of Mike's shenanigans. I unfortunately sometimes don't catch them while they're hot, and then, you know, he deletes his account and everything, and it's all gone. Okay, so we've got a person named Shadow, and then we've got Mike D. So, Shadow says, "Thanks for answering, though that's a bit disappointing. Even if they're good, knowing they don't matter takes away a lot of excitement to read them. But who am I to tell you how to run things? By the way, you've been doing a great job on the story department for the games, so keep it up." And then Mike says, "They don't matter," in quotes, is relative phrasing. I mean, The Great Gatsby doesn't matter at all, but hey, it's a cool story. And thanks, we do our best. Okay, so this one was mostly just kind of like irritating rather than anything else, just because we're comparing apples to oranges here. The Great Gatsby is a fictional story within a real world context, and so to compare like the Bendy books to like the Bendy games is not the same thing. It's comparing fiction to fiction, where The Great Gatsby versus the real-ass world, that's fiction to reality. What this person was trying to get at was that now that the Bendy books are not canon, that they don't really matter to the main story anymore because they're not canon. I don't know, this one was just kind of like really irritating and weird, and it kind of sets the stage for how bafflingly odd it is how Mike like views Bendy and the Ink Machine as a whole in the context of like in tandem with the books. It's so weird. But anyway, this is an interaction between, I don't know, Zivit and Mike D. So Zivit says, "The Meatly and Adrian said literally the opposite. I don't want to sound hostile towards Mike, but he also said that BATDR won't be a sequel." And then Mike D said, "Nah, we both said they aren't canon. And me saying BATDR wasn't a sequel was me being silly, as it is contained within a cycle. As a lover of time loops, it was a fun statement that was, as usual, taken out of context and used against me. BATDR is the sequel to BATIM, and books aren't canon." I find it odd that this person was pointing out that Mike had said before that it wouldn't be a sequel, and then it ended up being a sequel. And then Mike goes and says it was a statement that was taken out of context and used against him. What? Like, I understand that people are kind of rabid and will just hate on things for no reason, but at the same time, no, brother, like, it wasn't taken out of context. I don't know how taking something that you said and saying it, like, just repeating it back to you, is taking it out of context. Like, does that make sense? It's just weird because he really refuses to address Adrienne at all, even when met with the topic of the Bendy books. Shouldn't she be brought into this conversation at all? I mean, like, I know you can't really speak for her, but at the same time, like, we're just gonna brush over the fact that, is this a 2-to-1 vote? Like, what are we doing here? Because she obviously thought that the books were canon, to the point where she went to extreme lengths to make them line up with the games as best that she could. And now you're gonna turn around and say that, nope, they were never canon. This was Shadow's initial tweet. That was the Twitter user from earlier. And they said, I probably won't get an answer, but why did you make this decision, referring to the decanonization of the Bendy books? I haven't followed the books for a while, but from what I understand, they haven't messed with anything, so this seems kinda nonsensical. Was this always the case, or are you just making changes to the lore? And then Mike D answers, sure, I'll answer. Always been the case. We focus on the games that we make for our lore, following the main story. This doesn't diminish the quality and exciting stories that are officially licensed for our universe. Bendy is for everybody. Okay, so this pisses me off a lot. This pisses me off a lot for many reasons, but the most obvious reason I'm going to explain right now. So, Halfusek, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. He said, hi, I hope you don't mind me asking, and it's, of course, okay if you can't answer this question, but me and some friends were wondering if Dreams Come to Life is going to be canon to BATIM. And then Adrienne says, like, are the events in the book canon to the game, etc.? And then he says, yes, exactly. Things like the events, characters, and environments for something specific, for example, Joey having Henry's drawing on his desk. It's an interesting insight to his character. And then Adrienne replies with, right, cool, yes, everything in the book is canon. It was developed with the approval of the Meatly, Mike Mood, and Bookpast. Added a certain amount of pressure on yours truly, I don't mind saying. Let me get this fucking straight. Adrienne, verbatim, says that the book was developed with the approval of the Meatly, Mike Mood, and Bookpast. So she had Mike and Meatly's blessing in terms of how the book came to be and I suppose proofreading over it or whatever. I'm not exactly sure how the process would go, but basically they were involved in the process. And now you might be thinking Mike and Meatly would have mentioned at some point if the Bendy books weren't canon, on Twitter or whatever, just to avoid confusion. They didn't say anything like that, and just kind of let us all believe that the Bendy books were canon. And by all accounts, they were. The author said that they were, and the people that could have easily contradicted this and said, no, they're not, didn't come out and say such a thing. And you might be thinking like, oh, well, they never said it was canon. It's like, okay, but your fan base got confirmation from the author of the books that they were canon, meaning that they were. Because why would you let your author say that something was canon that wasn't canon? Are we all on the same page now? It's so dumb. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. It's genuinely very, very frustrating because this guy is just flat out lying to his fan base at this point, and I know, story of my life, indie horror game developer lies to large portion of their fan base more at 6. It's so exhausting. I think exhausting is probably the right word for it. And then in the same breath, this guy says Bendy is for everybody. Well, let me briefly touch on that aspect as well.
Luigi, don't be a dinophobe. It takes all colors to make a rainbow. Except black.
Now, this I'm going to bring up from the AMA, and you've probably heard it a million times, and I know it's not a new thing to bring up, but I do feel like I want to at least address it briefly here, because with the Bendy books being decanonized now, and this being a recent development, it just sets a worrying precedent because, like, there were a lot of minority characters, identities, things like that in the Bendy books, and they just are kind of gone from the Bendy universe now. On top of that, you know, you have certain plot lines that are also gone. You just have a general depth that Adrian added to the series that is now kind of gone back up to a shallow point. Like, you've taken a very large chunk of information that a lot of the fan base probably thought was like canon or canon adjacent. You kind of took it and like shat it out the window, you know? And then to say what I'm about to read off is just a really worrying precedent to set. Okay, so some guy named Mr. Louie on Reddit said, "Are there any minority or LGBT characters in the games? And I do mean games, not the novel. The canon doesn't shy away from confirming multiple characters as straight and white, so it would be nice to have some confirmation regarding minority characters if there are any." And Mike responded, "Hi, Mr. Louie. Thanks for the question. Are there any minority or LGBT characters in the games? And I do mean games, not the novel, blah, blah, blah. While I'm a supporter of anyone pursuing happiness in whatever they identify as, we've built a universe where characters are defined by what they do, not who they identify as." That doesn't seem like a very good way to build a character. Like, your characters are going to have, you know, gender or sexual identities, whatever, and other aspects of their identities, like their professions and everything. And that's going to affect their actions and what they do. Like, these two concepts are not something that you can necessarily isolate and have a good character. It's kind of aggravating also the fact that they seem to think that, like, this hasn't happened before in Bendy, because there was a whole thing with Susie and Sammy and Joey in, like, chapter 3 of Bendy and the Ink Machine, and Susie has definitely made it apparent in her audio logs that she does have a crush on both on both Joey and Sammy. In that regard, her heterosexuality, which is a sexuality, was influencing some of the decisions she was making. She seemed to have trusted Sammy to some degree, which only made it twice as heartbreaking when she had her role handed off to somebody else. She had previously thought, like, oh, things are going well with Joey, when it turns out not necessarily the case, and he pretty much lied to her face. I'm assuming about, like, her job security and things like that. So that's not even fucking true. Like, you did build a world where what characters identify as, you know, or their sexual orientation or whatever, that is roped into the plot of Bendy and the Ink Machine. And I know, you know, people like Chris Portal have already pointed this out before, but I thought I would just point it out again, because, like, how a character identifies absolutely is going to influence what actions they take. There's this real pussyfooting around, like, anything to do with anything, really, because you make sure to confirm that, like, oh, Norman is white, and you make sure to confirm that, like, oh, Thomas is white, which I know Thomas was a different situation, but still, like, you go out of your way to, like, confirm the white characters, and then you're sidelining all of your, like, women characters and minority characters in the books that are, like, confirmed black and all that. And also, like, Buddy and his Polish grandfather, who was a Holocaust survivor, you just kind of yeeted those out of existence, too. Like, you want to maybe explain that one? I don't... And this is something else, too, that, like, you could very easily do something like represent different cultures within the Lost Ones. And you might be thinking, Archer, what the fuck are you talking about? The Lost Ones are a bunch of dead people. They're going to retain some level of humanity, or they're going to try to, because, you know, if you can't hang on to whatever humanity that you still have, then you essentially become an animal. You'd get different groups of people that live in different environments. Like, we almost got something with, like, the whole Amok gang or whatever it was, but that was more so, like, basically a gang. Like, even with something as simple as like how they might remember their, in this case, like their still living relatives. Would there be a tradition somewhere of some of the lost ones, like putting up a friend does and stuff like that? There's so much that you could do to humanize these people and make the environments more interesting and just and feel more lived in, I suppose. And I'm just using them as an example. But my overarching point is like, you can bring in different aspects of different cultures and stuff, you know, and do it in a sensible way that's going to add to your universe rather than become some kind of like political thing you can affix to your story. I guess this is another tangent, but I'll address it anyway, and I'll try not to take too long on this one. So, because the Bendy books have been decanonized, this has taken out Illusion of Living, and I said this in my Joey Drew Gay video, where this sets a worrying precedent because, first of all, it takes away a lot of Joey's backstory and a lot of things that we know about Joey, and it kind of just erases his history as a person, and we only really know kind of the more superficial details, I suppose, about him from like the games and stuff, which it's not that the game dialogue is bad, it's just that Adrienne added a lot and it was very suddenly kind of just yeeted out of existence. With Joey, there was also a lot of queer coding in that book, and while I still think there is a lot of queer coding for him in terms of like Dark Revival, which is a game, one of the Bendy games, so this would be in the canon universe. I feel like it could, and I'm not saying it will be, but I feel like it could be used as an excuse to sort of straightwash Joey, or like ignore the fact that he's a very, very queer-coded character. If you want an in-depth, like, explanation of why Joey pretty much is gay, you can go watch my Joey Drew Gay video, but I'm just really worried about, like, the queer erasure, too, of, you know, certain characters. I suppose Joey would be, like, the one I'd be the most concerned about, just because that was the one that we had a lot of canon information about, and a lot of canon info that suggested that, hey, this man is gay and European. I'm just tired, generally. Like, just add people that are diverse and different. Like, I feel like that shouldn't be something that you have to have your teeth pulled to even consider, if that makes any sense. So I'm just really, really agitated that, like, the only characters in Bendy and the Ink Machine so far that have, like, had their sexualities confirmed within the context of the story, or, like, had their races confirmed within the context of the story, have always been, like, cisgender, heterosexual, white people. There's nothing fucking wrong with being cisgender, heterosexual, or white. It's just the simple and unfortunate fact that, like, why are you making all of your characters like that? You know what I'm saying? That you had a lot of information that said otherwise about certain characters, and you just kind of yeeted it out the window and farted it into oblivion, so I don't know. I'm rambling now. That's about it. Archer Casey, signing off.
What are you doing?
I'm posting false information on the web.
Why?
It's fun.